Hello everyone, today we're going to be going over Game 3 of this year's Meijin Sen between Fujii Sota, the current Meijin, and his challenger Itodani Tetsuro. And Games 1 and 2, Fujii won pretty easily, I would say, at least relatively compared to other of his title match games where Itodani did something kind of strange and it didn't really work out. So this game, people were pretty interested in what Itodani was going to do. And here, this is actually exactly the same as a bishop exchange opening, so it looked at least a little bit like maybe Itodani was going to do something interesting in a bishop exchange, but no, he blocks his bishop diagonal and he's going to go for Gangi. And apparently this is something that he plays quite regularly. It's something that Fujii doesn't play quite as often, and so perhaps this will be the kind of playing field that Itodani needs in order to give Fujii a game. So for the most part in the early game, it was very, very standard. Like one of the main decisions that you have to make when you're playing Gangi is where you're going to put this silver. Generally speaking, you're either going to put it on 4-7 or on 5-7, and both has pros and cons. I think right now, especially in double Gangi, it's a bit more common to put your silver on 4-7. It just gives your camp a little bit more balance. And so that's what Itodani goes for. And Fujii basically also just continues playing pretty slow. He also decides to go for this shape. This is called Tsunogin Gangi. Some sort of like double horn Gangi or something like that. Now, the main part where they actually diverge is that Itodani decides to play his gold on 4-8, and what this is signifying is that he actually wants to put his king in the center. Whereas when you put the gold here on 5-2, Fujii is going to castle his king this way. So yeah, in combination with putting your king in the center, you almost always put your rook on the back rank. This gives it a lot of scope, a lot of influence, and there are some scenarios where you can counterattack on the 8th file. So this is actually something that I like to play as well when I'm playing double Gangi. So yeah, the early game was quite slow. Not really that much happening. Here is another place where Fujii kind of starts to make committing moves where he pulls this bishop back. It's actually a bit unconventional. Usually you see this type of maneuver a lot when players are playing like static rook on a Guma against Fujibisha in order to kind of get the bishop out and activate it. And usually you want to activate it this way. But obviously, it's not as common when you've already jumped the knight because it blocks the bishop. So this is a kind of an interesting idea from Fujii. And I think a lot of people are saying, okay, this is probably something he studied and has planned because on the surface, it does look kind of strange. You can't even bring it this way because this pawn is here in the way. So after seeing this, Itodani decides, okay, I'm going to switch. Instead of having my king in the center, I'm going to go into Migikyoku. And actually, Itodani is very, very well known for making Migikyoku popular relatively recently. Maybe in like the last 10 years or so, this is something that he really pioneered. Yeah, so you can see here, it seems maybe a little bit counterintuitive not to drop the pawn right away. But one of the benefits of this structure of Migikyoku and the back rank rook is that you actually don't need to drop this pawn because the rook defends the promotion square of the opposing rook. And there are some ways where if they kind of overcommit, you can counterattack on that side of the board as well. But Fujii knows this, he goes ahead and pulls back, and then while Itodani can't, he decides to push this pawn in the center. So obviously if he takes with the silver, Itodani is just going to trap the silver with this pawn drop. So this is another reason why he didn't want to drop that pawn back on the 8th file, is so that he can actually make this pawn push and force Fujii's silver back. So here, this is another like shogi proverb. You want to defend your vanguard pawns. So he goes ahead and brings the silver up. Fujii pushes the pawn, takes, and forces the drop back. As really, he just gets to take that pawn that was on the 5th file and put it into his hand. And here Itodani decides to go ahead and drop the pawn to block. Now there's potential for some tarefus to combine with some knight stuff, and so I guess he just decided, okay, let me play it safe. And Fujii goes ahead and castles his king all the way to 2-2. Usually in Gangi, you keep your king in this section a decent chunk of the time, but especially because Itodani's already moved his bishop away from that main diagonal, it's kind of nice to go ahead and bring the king all the way to 2-2. And again, okay, Itodani's supporting kind of his advanced position by moving the gold. And Fujii jumps the knight, and again, Itodani goes ahead and brings the bishop. So this is actually also pretty common. I haven't quite seen it in this where you go into Migigyoku and then bring the bishop here, but I play it pretty often where if I start with this king, the center king, and I push the fifth file pawn, this is actually a really nice spot in double Gangi games for the bishop because basically all of these knights are jumped and they're influencing the middle of the board, but they're no longer defending the edge. So a lot of tactics in double Gangi can come down to using your bishop and doing some sort of edge attack. Another reason why you want the king on 2-2 in this position for Fujii. So Fujii goes ahead, trades off the knights, and Itodani decides to bring the bishop back. And the reason why he did this, let's say you kind of do nothing here. Let's say, okay, maybe like you want to bring the rook around, is that there's this move pawn drop, and you can counterattack on the center. So if you take the pawn, pawn drop 5-5, because the rook is here, is going to be able to capture this silver. So what Itodani does instead, he's going to bring the bishop back, basically to just chase the rook away, so he doesn't have to worry about defending against the rook on the 5th rank. And here Itodani makes a pretty committing move, knight drop on 2-6. Yeah, I mean, this is just he wants to attack, right? It's a committing move, obviously, because you have like the one piece that you've gathered and you're committing it to the board. Whereas Fujii gets his Toki pin in his hand, so he's a little bit more flexible with what he can do. And so Fujii starts immediately to evacuate the king. He sees, okay, like I'm not going to be able to defend the edge anymore. Let me get my king the hell out of here. And actually in this position was the end of day 1. And so the next move was sealed, and the sealed move, Itodani starts that edge attack with pawn to 1-5. Fujii takes. And he goes ahead and pushes his pawn to 4-5, going ahead and getting his attack going. This is another interesting move, pawn 1-6. I think this is also one of the top engine moves, and he's basically putting a clock on Itodani. He's saying, hey, if I get to promote this pawn, drop a pawn, I'm going to break through, and that's going to win me the game. So, you know, it seems like a bit of a slow move, but I don't think you have an attack, and you better attack me right now. And so Itodani does that. He goes ahead, trades the knights off, and then pushes the pawn. This is one of the things about these types of double Gangi games, especially if you go into Migigyoku specifically, it can get really scary because you almost need to attack the king from your own castle. But this is kind of Itodani's bread and butter, kind of navigating these like really crazy positions. And again, I think I mentioned it in my previous one. The only problem for him in this match so far is that he's actually playing probably against the best calculator of all time in Fujii. Okay, so Fujii goes ahead, takes the pawn back. He goes ahead and drops the pawn on the bishop's head. Bishop runs. And he again makes a pretty committing move, this knight drop on 2-7. And I was watching the live commentary. It was being done by Watanabe, who has been out with like an injury of sorts, something about I think his back where it was too painful for him to even like to sit for multiple hours. So I think in 2025 he didn't play most of the year, but he's coming back now. He's healthy. It's good to see him back. And he was commenting with I think Yamasaki Sensei, also like a very very top level player. And Watanabe was saying that he saw this shape and thought, "Oh my God, that's so ugly." And interestingly enough, Yamasaki was like, "Oh, really? I didn't think of that at all." But to be fair, I'm kind of like a similar player to Itodani, where we kind of just wing it. Whereas Watanabe is more like a to the basics and fundamentals, and kind of really trying to follow like shogi proverbs type player. But yeah, no, this is actually kind of ugly, right? Because you're blocking your rook with not just this pawn is still there, but now you're blocking with 2 knights. Like this rook's almost never going to get in the game. And these knights don't really defend themselves. They're very vulnerable. But interestingly enough, Watanabe did say the fact that this looks so terrible but the engine eval says that the game is still kind of even. He thought that Itodani was actually doing pretty well in the game, because if it's like more of a standard position, Fujii's going to know exactly what to do, but this is such a wonky looking position. But the fact that it's still even, he thought it was kind of going in Itodani's at Itodani's pace, and this is the type of game that Itodani could win. So that was pretty interesting. But here, Fujii played a move that no professional player really saw coming, other than the fact that they were looking at some of the engine evals. So here, technically, the engine says the best move is pawn 1/7 promote, and the idea is that you just attack. And the main idea for Itodani is to go ahead and jump this knight to target this silver. Like, this silver is dead now. But it turns out it's just not enough, and Fujii's attack is actually quite strong. So Fujii didn't do that. He played, actually, I would say, the move of the game. Obviously, it's not the top engine move, but this is such a deep move. It's pawn drop on 4/5. And at first, you kind of just scratch your head, and you're just like, what is this pawn drop even doing? Right? Like, you're not blocking any of Itodani's major pieces. You're not really threatening that much. It's not like a tarehu where you're threatening a promotion. And actually, I think somebody who was in the playing room had told Watanabe that when Fujii made this move, Itodani himself literally scratched his head, and he got up and left the room. And he said he could hear Itodani mumbling, what the hell does this move even mean? He didn't know. He couldn't figure out what the heck this was. And so I think Itodani spent about 30 minutes or something and decided, I'm just going to take it because I don't really understand it. That was kind of the main consensus between Yamasaki and Watanabe, that like he just couldn't figure out what the heck the idea was. Now, the main idea, number one idea, which is actually pretty straightforward, I think, and even the pros would understand it, is what the actual threat of this move is dropping the knight to 4/6. And why the knight drop on 4/6 is so strong, it comes with check on the king, but it also breaks and blocks the bishop's influence on 3/5. And so now the knight can't take on 3/5, right? And when you drop the knight here, the only way to get rid of it, you would have to give up a gold in order to get rid of the knight. And that's a very counterintuitive thing to allow and to kind of like live with in a way. But it turns out, as you can see from the engine eval, that the best move is to just let it happen, right? And interesting, in that live commentary with Watanabe and Yamasaki, the initial thing that they thought to do, okay, well, let's just quick look. Oh, okay, I can see, like, if you try and actually go knight takes 3/5 now, he just drops knight on 4/6 with check. It blocks your bishop. This kind of sucks. You have to give up the gold if you want to keep the knight. So I wouldn't go for this. Both of them. Like, they basically just got to this position and immediately moved on to try to look at other lines. And they didn't actually come back to it until they basically decided all the other lines are bad. And they're like, well, maybe you kind of just need to give up the gold and go from there. And you can actually see the top engine move is actually give up the gold and then take the silver and play this position, and it's still even. So yeah, like if Itodani would have kind of seen through that and said, okay, I can give up the gold, but this is still a playable position for me, we would have still had a game. But instead, Itodani decides to just take the pawn, and I suppose he just missed this move, which is knight drop on 5/3. Now you saw in the engine was actually suggesting pawn drop 5/7. We'll see that come in later, so it's more of like a move order thing. Both of these things are going to transpose into each other. And interestingly enough, the instant Watanabe and Yamasaki saw this move, they're like, oh, Sente's bad now. Sente's in a really bad position now. And that's even with getting, this bishop for a silver, because now the silver guards this. And even not only the silver guard this pawn, if you take it, the silver is not hit by the knight anymore. And so, yeah, they saw this and they're like, oh, okay, like this is actually very, very bad for Sente already. So it's actually crazy that, that's really literally just reading 1-2 moves and they just like Itodani didn't see it. The pros didn't see it immediately. And these are top level pros in like Watanabe and Yamasaki. So yeah, this honestly, this was basically the decisive sequence of the game. There were a couple other spots later on that Itodani had potential, maybe not comeback potential, but to keep it a little bit closer. But after this, like Fujii kind of just took over the game. Like you can see, these are very natural attacking moves that Itodani's trying to make, but the attack just runs out right here. He has no more pieces in hand. He can take the gold, but when he takes back, the king's just going to be able to run. And here you see this pawn drop on 5-7 move. And the idea here, when you take, now knight drop on 4-5 comes with a tempo on the bishop, and this knight is backed up by this knight. So there's just a ton of pressure on Itodani's king here. Itodani goes ahead and plays silver to 5-6. You might think, why doesn't he run the bishop? But basically every single variation that includes running the bishop in some way just gets hit with pawn 3-6, and you can't defend this anymore. Because you only have a pawn in hand, and you already have a pawn in this. So no matter really what you do, Fujii's going to break through, like drop a silver here, and then even if you're able to trade this knight off, this knight's going to come in and replace it on 4-5. So yeah, like running the bishop here doesn't quite work. He decides, okay, let me get another piece to defend over here. And Fujii goes ahead and pushes pawn to 3-6 anyway. And I think this is actually quite an instructive moment in the attack from Fujii. I think most of us, probably even me included, hey, I get a bishop for this knight. But actually, this knight is doing way more work being on the board, attacking the king's head, than the bishop knight trade would have for Fujii. And actually, if you trade this knight, it's actually quite a big mistake, and you can see the eval does drop quite a bit. It's still kind of okay because you have this knight coming in, and you have this pawn kind of still with the attack, but it's actually just much stronger to keep this knight on the board, continue to make more threats, because you're going to be able to take this bishop later anyway. So yeah, I think very instructive. A lot of times when you have really strong attacks like this, it's much better to just add to the attack than to go ahead and liquidate kind of like a material advantage. So here, Itodani decides to take the knight. Again, Engine thinks he should just start running away with the king. And this actually does a decent job trying to pull around the game. Like, he has quite a bit of room to run over here. But it just turns out that really no matter what he does, like, this is still just a decisive advantage for Fujii. And so he decided, okay, let me just try and actually kill the attack. But again, now this knight gets in, and he has an extra silver in hand. His main idea with this is, okay, I can counterattack with this knight drop on 4-4. This is actually quite scary. But the bad news for Itodani is that this move, knight takes silver, turned out to be a Tsumero. And nobody saw that. Itodani didn't see it. Really, only Fujii saw it. And actually, even the engine doesn't see it. I think, ran the engine for quite a bit in this position before. I don't know why I didn't keep it, but I think I got to like depth 36 and it still doesn't see the mate, which is just crazy. I think this may be like the second or third time I've seen Fujii do that, where and this is actually mate in 35. This is a Tsumero of a mate in 35 from here. And so like, yeah, the engine just doesn't see it. You need to run it until like 40 depth for it to see it. So obviously the Lee Shogi cloud engine is not quite that strong. I don't know how long it would take if I had a local engine running it. But yeah, it turns out that Itodani does not actually have the time to make this knight drop. And so he goes ahead with the mating sequence, pawn promotion on 3-7. Gold takes, and then again, similarly, patience, add to your attack, don't cash it. I mean, this is now like a free bishop, but no, it's way stronger to drop this bishop. Again, it's mate. But honestly, even if this wasn't a mating attack, it's still a good idea to drop this bishop because you're adding to the attack. And look, you're forking these two pieces. You're going to get one of them anyway. No need to liquidate right now. Pawn drop to block, and then knight takes the gold. King takes, pawn drop on 3-6. King has to run. Gold drop on 3-7. And I think around here is where maybe it needs to go a little bit longer, but the engine starts to feel maybe there's something here with checkmate, right? So, there you go. You see, once it gets to about depth 17, it makes it like minus 40, even though you're following like the best moves that it was giving. King runs, and then here, it thinks the top move is gold takes 3-3. And silver takes 5-8, the second best move, but you see Fujii plays it and then immediately mate in 26. So yeah, king takes, gold takes, king runs, silver drop, king runs, and then bishop sack, get the king up, and then also a silver sack. So this is the two really nice moves to get the mate going, and the idea is now you get the rook in. So really looking at the whole board, really nice mating sequence. Blocks with knight, gold takes, the classic sending Tetsuji, blocks with the gold, bishop drop, king runs, gold drop 4-7, another piece sack, and this is where Itodani resigned. So yeah, like this game, I would say was a bit more competitive. So I think this is the first time that Itodani had an even position on day 2 of the match so far on any of the day 2. And you saw he had chances actually. He had an interesting potential attack. If he could have seen through that moment where he needed to kind of give up the gold for the knight, and that would have kind of like killed Fujii's counterattack, and he would still have a decent attack. It would have been an even game. He still would have had a lot of work to do to convert that, obviously. But yeah, like Fujii just sees through it, and then the instant there's a mate on the board, Fujii sees mate in 35, lets him drop this knight for the fork, and you can see like it. You just never got to take the gold. So yeah, another obviously insanely impressive game from Fujii. That pawn drop on 4-5 is, like that's one I'll remember, and I think even Watanabe was saying he thinks that's like, almost like legendary status pawn drop for him. I'm just like, I almost want to go back because I did have something to say about that I just remembered. Where, like it's even hard to explain this move. Obviously, like this knight drop, now that you know that it's there and what it does, but to like decide that you need to drop the pawn to threaten that knight drop is, yeah, like it's just something like Watanabe didn't say it, no one saw it, because it's such an awkward thing. Like a lot of times when you drop pawns like this to like control a square, it's usually gonna be on like the 4th or 6th rank where it's like a tarefu in a way, where you're threatening a pawn promotion or you're threatening to drop a gold or silver to attack the king. But to make this pawn drop on the 5th rank in order to drop a knight, that's actually, I don't even know if I've seen that before. And yeah, so this is the move that I'll remember for sure from this game. It was just really creative move, I think, to think, hey, I really want to drop a knight, so let me drop a pawn to protect it, and to understand that it can't be taken, right? To know the follow up is also good for you. So yeah, super interesting game. I'm a little bit afraid that Itodani is gonna get swept, but it seems again just his play style, Itodani, where he tries to basically trick you into making mistakes. Really hard for that to work when you're playing against, basically the closest human thing to an engine. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this one. I'm gonna be doing a few more review videos soon. There was just a ton of really interesting games and really impactful, important games in the pro scene in like the last week or so. So yeah, look forward to that, and I'll see you again soon. See ya.